I've written a handful of books. I got my first offer back around 2014. I turned it down. I'm glad I did. It wasn't what I wanted. I kept writing books, written some screenplays. One of them landed on a studio desk in Beverly Hills. That was in 2016. Done a couple of short films, and I'm working on my first feature film right now. It's fun. It's stuff that I love doing. I had a pencil in my hand. I think when I was 8 years old, in the third grade, we were supposed to write a book, like a little short story.
Yeah.
And I wrote mine, and I incorporated my classmates into the story. And my little book at 8 years old, it was the only book that they read in front of the teacher read in front of the class.
Oh, that's great. Welcome to Connections. My name is Glenn Gould, and I'm here today with my good friend Russell Lingerfelt. Having known you and known the things you do, I think our audience would find it just really fascinating, and I want to know a little bit more. Even though we spend time together, I don't get a chance to ask you some of the questions that I'd like to.
I've written a handful of books. I got my first offer back around 2014. I turned it down. I'm glad I did. It wasn't what I wanted. Kept writing books, written some screenplays. One of them landed on a studio desk in Beverly Hills. That was in 2016. And done a couple of short films, and I'm working on my first feature film right now. So it's fun. It's stuff that I love doing. I've had a pencil in my hand. I think when I was 8 years old, in the third grade, we were supposed to write a book, like a little short story.
Yeah.
And I wrote mine, and I incorporated my classmates into the story. And my little book at 8 years old, it was the only book that they read in front of the teacher read in front of the class.
Oh, that's great.
So I was 8 years old. I think I'm 8 years old at that time, and I just kind of kept writing. And when I was 15, I started keeping a journal, just writing about new things that I was experiencing. I didn't write daily in it, but just when something neat happened.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're 15, everything is so fresh.
I was going to say a lot of neat things happen.
Everything is fresh, new, and exciting. You haven't seen it before, and so everything was exciting. So I would write, and I think that really helped me write in thrift.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, why use 4 words when you can write 1? Because your hand's going to get tired,
And the audience is going to get tired too.
Yeah, so I started writing in a journal when I was 15, and I have like 5 or 6 3-ring binders about this big, from about age 15 to 30. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but around 30, life kind of stopped being so exciting, because you just
you've seen a lot.
Yeah, you've seen a lot and you've experienced a lot, and now it's just kind of everything that you are encountering. It's rare that you come across something brand new.
Right.
But when you're a teenager, everything's brand new.
Sure.
So that's it.
So tell me a little bit. You said you had an offer to write a book.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, here's actually a life lesson to throw in there. When I was a school teacher, I lived in Franklin, Tennessee.
Yeah.
It was right outside Nashville.
Okay.
And I would go to the Starbucks in downtown Franklin, Tennessee, beautiful town.
It is, yeah.
And I would write. And I had a lady across from me say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I was a school teacher, and I don't know why I didn't say it. I think I was trying to be more intentional to make it as a writer.
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm a writer." And she said, "No kidding. My husband's the CEO of Thomas Nelson Books. He's right over there getting his coffee.
Isn't that the way it works?
Just wait 1 second." And I'm sitting there like, it was the first time in my life that I had just told someone I was a writer instead of a school teacher. If I would have said, "I'm a school teacher, but I write on the side," the conversation probably wouldn't have went the way it did.
Exactly.
And he sat down with me, and the book had already went viral. And here's what I mean by that. I was keeping a blog on relationships because my bachelor's degree was actually marriage and family counseling. And I was keeping a blog on it, and I cranked out 150 articles. And one of them I had actually taken from a guy with his permission. I really was touched by it. And he was like, I think the title was "Beautiful Advice from a Divorced Man After 16 Years of Marriage." And I put it on my blog, and somebody in London shared it, and I had 6 million views, or 3 million views in a 1-month period.
Wow. And
my novel that I'd written was advertised in that. And so $5,000 worth of ebook copies were sold, and $5,000 worth of the paperbacks were sold. So I made 10 grand.
What was the title of the book?
The Mason Jar.
Okay.
The Mason Jar was my first novel.
Okay.
And this was about, I hadn't written the other novels yet. It was just this one. And so I'd written it in 2012, put it out in the world. I got a lot of feedback. I rewrote it, relaunched it again in 2014. And I think the blog article went viral around that time. So thankfully, it was the new edition that got out there because it was better. And the CEO of Thomas Nelson, and they were bought by HarperCollins.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a division of HarperCollins,
right.
which is a big...
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's like the top 5 publishers.
Yeah.
He put me in touch with his editor, and then I started making phone calls to people in Nashville, Tennessee, who is the agent to use for these situations, and they dropped his name. I reached out to him. Well, it would have been an easy deal for him because the book already wanted to be bought. But they said, now this was 2014, probably 2 years prior, I knew a guy that was writing a book every year, and groups like Thomas Nelson were buying it for 50 grand. They offered me $10,000. Well, I'd already made $10,000 selling it myself. I had also finished a film production internship in Nashville. That's why I was in Nashville so much. I finished a film production internship where I learned screenwriting, directing, producing. And they wanted to keep the film rights also for the $10,000.
Oh, okay.
And she said, well, we have a relationship with Lionsgate. But I had the experience to know that doesn't matter. If you've got a great story and a great script, you could have Lionsgate bid on it and put some of the other, folks bidding on it too and crank that up. It doesn't matter if you have a relationship with Lionsgate. And I hope she's not watching this. But I remember thinking, you think that she doesn't realize that I have a little, no, but a little enough to say no. Right. And the agent, when I said no, the agent told me that I was the first writer that both sides had ever came across, that when I had an opportunity to sell my first book, I said no. Yeah. They said I was the first one.
I would imagine, nuts. I mean, I would imagine that's the way it is, though, because you've cranked this out, you've never had experience, and most of them, anybody that writes hasn't had any experience, and then you get an offer to be, and you're going to get paid, and it's a big deal, and they're a big company, and it's going to be everywhere. I can tell all my friends I'm in Barnes & Noble. I'll tell you an interesting story. A friend of mine and I wrote a couple of books early in my career, and when, I don't know how he did it, but it was he had it in Barnes & Noble. Mm-hmm. And we didn't sell very many through Barnes & Noble. We sold a lot through other avenues. But it was a real kick to be able to tell people, go ahead and look it up in Barnes & Noble. It's right there. And so, I can imagine when you're an aspiring writer, I not only imagine I did it, that it's hard to say no. But like you said, you'd already proven to yourself you could sell it, and you had other knowledge. So from there, what happened?
Well, I started getting meetings. I cranked out the screenplay. Mm-hmm. And I remember I put on Facebook, I said, I'm looking for someone that has connections in the film industry. Whether it's New York or LA, I didn't care. This is before the industry starts coming to Georgia. Right. So this was 2014.
And you're still in Tennessee?
Yes, sir. I'm in Tennessee. And was I? No, I was, okay, it's a long story. I was in Tennessee, and I was also, we have a farm in Alabama, so I was back and forth. So I was no longer living in Tennessee. I was living on our farm. We have a Black Angus cattle farm. And I was kind of going back and forth. And I was trying to make it as a writer. I think that by this point, I was trying to get out of education and just go be a full-time writer. So I was up in Franklin, Tennessee a lot. That's where the arts are. Right. Like the arts people, they'll hang out in Franklin. Yeah. That's where the musicians, the writers, everybody. And what was your question?
No, I'm just saying so you've said no, you wrote the screenplay
Okay. So I put it out on Facebook, and one of my buddies who went to Notre Dame said, hey, one of my friends went to Notre Dame. He is a film producer in Hollywood. And why don't I just put you guys in touch? And fortunately, the guy was about my age, and he was an up-and-coming producer. Mm-hmm. And he had produced a movie with Jerry Lewis, but the best way I can put this is Jerry Lewis had been out of Hollywood for a long years. Yeah. And only 2 or 3 years after they made the movie, he passed away. Oh, goodness. So and I think he passed away from natural things. He was just very old. Right. But he had done a movie with Jerry Lewis. But that was kind of the only thing he had done at that time.
Yeah.
He'd done another movie. I could tell this guy, he's on his way. Well, he was going to be at a wedding in Mobile, Alabama, and said, okay, so the book is sold, 10,000 copies or whatever it was. And he said, I like the idea, and I want you to come to Mobile and visit me while I'm down there. Because it was about a 5-hour drive for me.
Sure.
And we went down there, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
We had a blast.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to take the script and see what I can do. He flew me to Beverly Hills to meet his team. And his team had worked with Tom Hanks and Martin Scorsese.
Wow.
It was crazy. And they were looking at it, and it's an epic love story. So it's kind of like a Nicholas Sparks story, but it's more family friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very realistic. If you look at love stories that have done really well, like Casablanca, The Mason, I was about to say.
There you go, The Mason Jar. Speak it into existence.
Casablanca, The Notebook, Dear John.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Sleepless in Seattle.
Yeah.
You've got Mail.
You've Got Mail, right?
You've Got Mail.
Yeah.
If you look at it, if it was a book before it was a movie, it was written by a man. And if it made the screenplay like that, it was written by a man.
Interesting.
What you find is, and here's what I mean by that, the stories that are written by men, even if they're love stories, men tend to like them. And the reason is because we write the men as they really are instead of what the women wish they were.
Right.
And I'm not being mean.
I got
I'm being
you.
factual.
I got you.
For example, in The Notebook, when he is waiting on Allie, what is he doing? He's sleeping with a war widow. If a woman had written that, there's no way he would have been doing that.
Right.
He would have been doing something else.
Right.
But he's a sexual creature. He's a man.
Yeah.
And it said in the screenplay, to stifle the sting of loneliness, there was Martha Shaw, I think was her name, in the story.
Okay.
But so we get the excuse. He's lonely. He's a sexual creature. There's this beautiful young woman who's also young and hurt because her husband passed away in the war. And so there's an outlet for him.
Sure.
A guy wrote that.
Right.
And I'm just going to tell you, that's what a guy would do.
Yeah.
Most guys.
Right.
They understood that story does well if it's done the right way.
Right.
You got the right production behind it. So they're interested in pushing forward. Not long after that, Tom Hanks brings them A Hologram for a King, which is a movie he did. And he had the funding.
Right.
So they made it.
Yeah.
And mine got pushed to the side. After that, Martin Scorsese brought them the movie Silence and the money with that. And they used that one. Well, by that point, my screenplay
It's forgotten.
was forgotten.
Right, yeah.
And the tide turned. Female-led movies is what's in now.
Sure.
Female-driven love stories. That's what sells on Hallmark now.
Yeah.
Hallmark movies right now are female-led stories. That's what's in. Well, what we want to do is we're kind of waiting for the market to swing back, because there's swings.
Sure.
Things come and go. Things come back this way. And so when the market goes back to male-driven love stories, we're going to kind of put the pedal to the metal. And this time we have experience.
There you go.
So
yeah.
it's just a matter of time, but we will do something with that screenplay.
Well, that's great.
Thank you.
And so now you said you got a new novel that you've.
Yeah, so The Mason Jar, Clayton Fincannon was the main character in The Mason Jar, and he had two roommates. He had Brian Oz Bailey and Ryan Lockwood. Brian and Ryan sounded so similar that I used the name Oz for Brian Oz Bailey, and then so I named him Oz, even though his name is Brian. And then Ryan is the other roommate. Well, when The Mason Jar was released, everybody loved the grandfather figure who I created. People are like, is this a true story? How's your grandfather doing now? And it really shocks them when I say, actually, I'm more like the grandfather than I am Clayton Fincannon.
As young as you are, yeah.
He's just kind of the grandpa you wish you had.
Right.
Just very wise. And I used a lot, I didn't have the life experience to put that wisdom in there, but I've read a ton of great books.
Right.
So I wrote the grandfather, and then they really thought Oz was interesting. And Oz had pretended to be from Ireland and had adopted the Irish accent because he was from an inner city in Alabama, and a girl that he had a crush on was going to Pepperdine. And he faked the Irish accent to get an international scholarship that Guinness was offering if you wanted to go to Pepperdine and study theology. Now, this scholarship exists, and I actually wrote Os Guinness an email, and that's how I got the name Oz in this long story. But I wrote Os Guinness an email because I had met Oz at Pepperdine when I was a student there. He was a theologian. He loved to read theology and write theology, and I went to one of his talks. And I wrote him an email, and I said, would it be okay if I ran with this concept of this guy using the Os Guinness scholarship, or the Guinness scholarship to get his way into Pepperdine? And he wrote me an email, it was short and sweet, and he said, as long as you're not dragging the Guinness name through the mud, have at it.
Right.
Boom.
There you go.
So I created a story of him, of Brian Oz Bailey. And when his friends at Pepperdine find out what he did, they start calling him Oz because of Os Guinness.
Okay.
And that's how that name came out. So Alabama Irish was the next novel that I wrote, and it's about Brian Oz Bailey, who goes to Pepperdine, and we kind of pick up where we left off, where Clayton Fincannon from the Mason Jar and Ryan Lockwood, they're all there. But this is Brian's side of the story with a focus on his pursuit of love, right?
Sure.
And then that one did well. People said, oh, I like Alabama Irish better than I did the Mason Jar. And I had a really great idea for Ryan Lockwood. So the third novel was called Young Vines. And it's 10 years later, and Ryan is now a professor at Pepperdine. And his grandmother has passed away and has left him a vineyard in Tennessee. And the Youngs is the family that's running the vineyard now, but it belongs to him because he's the beneficiary. And so when he goes to the vineyard to sell it for what it's worth, the vine dresser's daughter is very attractive, and they're both single. And so it's the love story about him. Will I continue my life as a professor and be tenured and have a career? Will I go to Tennessee and start a new life with this young woman?
Yeah.
And her last name happens to be Young. So I titled it Young Vines. And that's the third one. And then the fourth one came out last year, and it's a standalone novel. And, I could tell a story about that, but I don't want to just keep talking. So.
No, that's great. That's great. So I mean, obviously you're not just playing along. You're a very serious writer, and you also do video. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the types of because I think you've got a couple of shorts you've done, and
yeah. So after my film internship, there was a guy. You can look him up on IMDb. His name is Brent McCorkle, and he and I just shot a Facebook message to each other the other day, and we're supposed to catch up in January because he's super busy.
Yeah. But
he's making high budget movies now. But in 2012, he was directing country music videos and commercials for Verizon Wireless where the budgets were $250,000.
Sure.
All right, to kind of put this in perspective here, a music video would probably be shot on $50,000. And these are big names.
Okay.
$250,000 would be a Verizon Wireless commercial. Low budget Hollywood movies are $3 million. And I remember reading Anthony Hopkins got paid $9 million. That's when you find out these movies that are made on 50 and 80 and hundreds of millions. Well, if you go and you start looking at the line budget, like Anthony Hopkins gets $9 million.
Yeah.
This person gets this, and this person gets this, and then the After Effects team or the post-production team, 200,000, just for like 30 minutes of work, a finished product.
Right.
Like so much money is thrown around.
Right.
But you can tell a decent story. You can tell a very decent story on less than $3 million. You can do it. You can tell a very decent story on $5,000 if you have a good script and you got people volunteering their time. And you've got some good acting. Like you can pull it off.
Sure. So
Brent sat down with me and we got along really well. And he just wrote down a list of screenwriting books. He said, go read all these books. And I read the books he recommended, and I read more. And I think I ended up reading 12 different books on screenwriting. Well, after I've read all of those, I can tell you right now, there's really only 2 you need to go read. Because everybody else, that's like the 2 one-stop locations. Everybody else is just kind of bouncing around.
So the 2 are?
Robert McKee's book on story.
Okay.
It's just called Story, and then there's a subtitle, Robert McKee. And then the other one is called Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. And it's called Save the Cat because go back and watch your favorite movie. Watch your favorite movie. And in the first 20 minutes, you're going to see your main character that you're rooting for save a cat. And here's what that means. He's going to do something nice. Or she's going to do something nice. In the green zone, they're busting through this third world country in tanks. One of the American soldiers gets out and pulls one of the kids away from the path of the tank and says, you stay right here, stay safe. he saved the cat.
Okay.
We're supposed to be rooting for the American military.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
In Rocky, in the movie Rocky, he's a bookie, so he beats people up who owe his boss money. But he never actually beats them up. He lets them off.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one girl, pre-adolescent girl, is hanging around with a bunch of adolescent boys, and she's trying to talk like them and cuss like them and chew tobacco, okay.
Right.
He tries to pull her aside and say, look, if you want to hang out with bozos, you'll become a bozo. And, maybe you don't need to be hanging around with all these teenage boys, And then at the end, she just tells him off. I think she actually says, screw you, Rocco. And then she runs into the house.
Right.
So we see Rocky saving the cat.
Okay.
And so Blake Snyder Save the Cat outlines a well-told screenplay movie of by the first 15% of your screenplay, you need to be doing this. By the 25% mark, you probably need to have your characters have done this by now. And he just outlines an entire
That's
movie.
great. I'm going to have to look that one up.
It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
So now, you have a robust career in such a short period of time because you're a relatively young man.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be some personal life.
Yeah.
You're married?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your wife?
Mm-hmm.
What's her name?
Her name's Megan.
Okay, yeah. How long have you been married?
A year and a half.
Okay. And you had a great trip somewhere.
We were in Italy.
Yeah. Tell a little bit about Italy. Did you do some filming over there?
Yeah. I did a video on my experiences in Sorrento. Sorrento is this small town that a lot of people don't know about, but it's a great port town for you to go see all of the Herculaneum and Pompeii. And you can also take boats to Positano, boats to Capri, and back within a quick time frame. So you could use Sorrento as a day trip.
Okay.
So from Sorrento, you can use Sorrento as a base to do day trips in different parts of southern Italy. And I just did kind of a vlog about my time in Sorrento. And I've published maybe 9 or 10 just vlogs on videos about my travels. And most of them, they get 80 views or 100 views. But surprisingly, the Sorrento views had 5,000 views.
Yeah.
Whereas I got one on Rome, I've got one on Florence, I've got one on Positano, I've got one on Capri, 100 views. But for some reason,
you haven't figured out the equation as to why.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, and you know what? Most people that have that experience, they say, you just keep producing, and somebody finds something they like eventually.
Yeah, as far as we know, some tourist organization in Sorrento put it on the website. But
there you go.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Just never know.
How'd you end up in Peachtree City?
Well, so I got out of education, and I started realizing, because I started working on movies and television shows on the production side.
Okay.
So I was a production assistant. I was the gopher. I had been in education, and I had a master's degree. And I ate a slice of humble pie, and I was fetching coffee for the executives. I actually have a photo, and maybe I can send it to you, a before and after photo. One of my first jobs in my first films is I asked the locations manager. This is the guy that goes in and finds the locations and manages the locations for the film. I said, well, what can I do to help? Because that's what I would always go to the film crew and say, what can I do to help? And I got famous for that. People are like, we love Russell because he just walks up to us and asks,
says, what can I do to help?
Well, it makes their job easier.
Sure.
And you make good money on film sets. So you're already making good money. And now your job's easier because you got this guy willing to do anything. So he said, yeah, I need you to go in there and I need you to clean the bathroom. Now, looking back, and I know this guy, he knew because he had already seen it. But there was a toilet that I thought that it had been used a lot and never flushed in 3 years. But come to find out, it just had been 3 years since it had been flushed, or years, because it was just black. That was it. Mold and black mold growing all over the toilet seat. The water was black. And so I took a photo of it. And then I took an after photo. And come to find out, it had been sitting there for so long. If you had taken a wooden spoon and just did this, the entire blackness off the water would have come right up.
Oh.
So just with one scoop, the blackness came off.
Yeah.
But the toilet seat was so bad, no matter what you sprayed on and scrubbed, nothing was coming off. I actually ended up taking the toilet seat off and just throwing it away. But man, that commode was pristine, man. It was clean. But I tell that story because, I had to start over. I had a master's degree. I even was in a PhD program at Fuller in Pasadena. I had a 4.0. Mm-hmm. And here I was on my knees scrubbing toilets and fetching coffee for executives. But I learned the industry.
Yeah.
And I learned, I thought that I wanted to be a producer, but I learned directing. I learned that directing was something I could do really well. And I got concreted in being a writer. And I would talk to filmmakers. They're like, wait a second, you know how to produce, you know how to direct, you have the screenplay, you own it, you have the novel, you own it. You've put yourself in a really good position. So I would get this like positive affirmation from quality filmmakers like Greg McCorkle.
Mm-hmm.
There's another guy you can look up. His name's T.K. McCamey, and he may be watching this, but TK's also, he got some awards for country music videos. He just directed his first feature film on 9 Million, but he was at that production company in 2012 that was directing music videos and took me under his wing, and we just exchanged some messages on Facebook. But he just finished his first movie, and it was a 9 million budget movie. So I'm super happy and proud of him. He's a Kentucky boy, so he grew up in a small town in Kentucky, and he's now killing it.
Well, I don't know that you used Kentucky for it, but I do recall last year at the holidays, you also make a pretty good batch of Irish cream or something. Yeah. What do you? Yeah.
Yeah, Irish cream. I just give it to family and friends during the holidays. You just put some. It's fun to find an Irish cream recipe on the internet. You put some in a little mason jar and give it as a gift. People like it.
Yeah, they did lots. So listen, we could talk for hours.
Oh, what was it? So how did I get here?
Yeah, how'd you get here? That's right.
So,
I forgot that part. Yeah.
So going back, I wanted to get out of education, and I saw that my life in film, I was always going to be on the road. So I realized eventually, I think and it is now, eventually the technology will be at a place where I could probably make my own films in my hometown or with my friends, experienced friends in filmmaking, in my backyard. And the technology is here now, but I kind of felt like we were going to be there eventually,
right?
Like 10 years ago. So I decided to stop pursuing filmmaking full time. And an investment firm that me and my family have been clients of for 30 years now, they were always trying to get me to work with them because I had opened up a Roth IRA when I was 18 years old. I used my graduation money while I had friends, and lawnmower money. I was mowing grass. While my friends went to Panama City Beach and partied, I took my graduation money, opened a Roth IRA. And so I would always call in every couple of years and ask questions. And I met a young woman from Noonan. Her dad was a retired Air Force colonel, and he was a Delta pilot at the time. And my best friend married her best friend, and we met at the wedding. And 3 years later, we went out on our first date, and that was in 2017, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is 2022. We got married a year and a half ago. So we dated for 3 years and then got married. And that's how I ended up in the Noonan Peachtree City area.
Found a local girl. There you go.
And a lot of the people that I have things in common with, that I have a commonality with, they live in Trilith Village in Fayetteville, which is where Trilith Studios is.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in Peachtree City. So I divide my time. I'm between Noonan, Peachtree City, and Trilith a lot.
That's great. And do you like the area? I mean,
it's awesome.
It's a great area.
I tell people, here's what makes this area great. It's got a small town feel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Of course, crime is here, but it's not that bad. All right, crime. We got low crime. But you are 45 minutes away from an international airport. You can get a direct flight to Dublin, Ireland, Rome, Italy. You can go to Australia. You can go to China, like that. You just drive 45 minutes, jump on a plane, and the world is your oyster. You're also within 5 hours of the beaches.
That's right.
And you're within 2 hours of the Appalachian Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. Like, it's such, and I'm not just saying this because I know this is going to be promoted in the local area. I really like it here.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife said, "Do you think that you could live in Noonan?" And I was like, yeah I could live in Noonan.
Yeah.
I was either going to live in Noonan or I was going to live in Franklin, Tennessee, the town where I first got discovered as a writer. Those were my two places I was going to be.
Okay, so I typically ask this question of everybody I interview who lives in the area, and that is, if you had to recommend a restaurant that you really like.
Well, I've got a few friends that are restaurant owners.
Yeah, see, this always happens, so he's not forgetting any of you. He loves you all.
Let me just go down the list.
Okay.
If I'm in Peachtree City?
Sure.
Okay.
Noonan, Peachtree City, the area?
Peachtree City. It'll help keep me out of trouble.
There you go.
I love Palmer's, Positano's, Highland Bakery. I like the other places, But if you were to find me on a Friday or Saturday night, and I'm going to be at a restaurant in Peachtree City, those are going to be my top 3.
Okay, yeah, those are all great recommendations. We get those often, and we love all 3 of them as well. I was going to say a few minutes ago, we could talk. I mean, I could talk to you forever. You were just so interesting, and you got such a breadth of experience. What could we do to help you? Is there some, are there people you're looking for? Like, I mean, is there something you're producing right now? Maybe you're looking for a location, or
okay. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just YouTube at J.R. Lingerfelt. J.R. stands for James Russell. I'm sure Glenn will put my name in text. And I hope maybe we can do a YouTube link. And here's why I ask that. That's where my short films are going to be. All of my video work will be there. But I've already got the 4,000 viewing hours over the last 12 months. YouTube says if you got 4,000 viewing hours and you have 1,000 subscribers, we're going to start paying you Google ad revenue. And I've got a friend of mine in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm not kidding you. He's making $10,000 a month off Google ads.
Isn't that crazy?
He's selling an online course, making $30,000 a month selling the online course. He makes $40,000 a month, and it's all driven because he had at least, I think he's got 100,000 subscribers now. But once you get to 1,000 subscribers, YouTube starts sending you some of that money.
Sure.
I've got about 400 subscribers now, so I'm trying to get to 1,000. You don't have to watch the content, but if you don't mind just going in there and subscribing, I would really appreciate it.
Well, I can tell you from experience, once you get there, you're going to want to watch the content because it's really, really good.
Hopefully I won't put stuff up there that would be a waste of
time. No. It's really, really good. So that's one way we can help you. Well, Russell, thank you for being here today and sharing with us. If somebody did want to reach out to you, how would they contact you?
There is, my website is James Russell, RUSSELL.org, jamesrussell.org. And from there, you'd be able to figure out my business phone number, but you could certainly drop me a message there too.
Great.
And all of my social media icons are on that website. So if you want to follow me on one of the social media platforms, they're all laid out there. So.
Well, thanks so much. Well, once again, thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing with us. Sometime in the near future, I'd like to have you back after the next production, and we can talk about it in a little detail. But just you're so fascinating, and I'm so glad that I got to know a little bit more about you. I mean, we spent a lot of time together already, but you never know what you're going to learn about somebody as interesting as he is. So thanks again, Russell, for being with us today. Just so much information, so many great ideas, and you show people that all you really have to do is decide what you want to do, apply yourself, and you might just find yourself in that perfect situation. So thanks for being with us. I'd like to have you back after the next production so that perhaps we can discuss that in detail too. So that'd be great. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Glenn with Connections. Hope you have a great afternoon. Bye now.